Color. I don't need to explain what color is, do I? I mean, I can't anyways because I suck at explaining things, so I'll just assume you know what colors are and move on. But yeah, today we'll be talking about color. Color theory, to be specific. I know, not the most interesting topic, but I'll try to make this fun, hopefully. Also, I'm drawing Sunday from Honkai Star Rail. No reason in particular, I just found this reference and was like, that's Sunday, and here we are. Anyways, let's get to it. Okay, I know I said we were gonna get to it, but before talking about colors, we need to talk about values. Or tones, which is what we called it back in school. I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't really get it either. That's why this video is about color and not values. But I'll try to explain this the best I can. So, values can be defined as how dark or light a color is, and they have a couple of uses. The first and most common is rendering. Tonal variations can be used to create shadows and highlights, and a starker tonal contrast can make a form more three-dimensional. The other kind of main use for values is to create a focal point. If a character is, say, surrounded by a dark background, using lighter values for them might make them stand out more. The same applies vice versa. Here's an example of some value sketches I did for this video. This was actually the original pose I was going to draw Sunday in, but I didn't know how to draw his halo thing, so this is what I'm doing now. Anyways, that's kind of all I can muster up about values. I do actually have one more thing in my notes. Oh yeah, this stuff is pulled from my high school art notes, by the way. But yeah, I also wrote about mood and atmosphere, which is more on the creative side of things. An example of this would be how high key lighting can make a piece more dramatic and vibrant, while dark, low key lighting can create a sense of mystery or tension. This is quite subjective though. Obviously, as an artist, you will have a mood or atmosphere you're going for, but it is, as most things are in art, up to interpretation how your piece comes off. For real this time, we are moving on to color. The first thing to note, color palettes. We're going to pull the color wheel up for this. There are a couple of color schemes you've probably heard about before and are commonly used in art. We have monochromatic, which is when you use different shades of one color. There's an analogous color scheme, which are colors that sit next to each other on the color wheel. Then we have complementary color schemes, which is when you use colors on the opposite side of the wheel. And split complementary, which I actually forgot existed until this very moment. I actually don't know how to explain this, so I'll just show it on the wheel. Basically, you're gonna pick a color, and then the other colors you'd use would be on the sides of the complementary color, so like right next to it. Last one I have written down is the triad color scheme, which I can only describe as an equilateral triangle. Apologies if I triggered any math trauma you may have had. I'm not even sure if it's an equilateral triangle. Anyways, all we need to know is when you draw a line from each of the colors you choose for this palette, it will form a triangle with three sides of the same length, approximately. Let's just move on. I've got much more to cover and frankly, not enough time. So, color palette exists. Why? Well, there are a multitude of reasons. The two most common is harmony and contrast. Using analogous colors can unite a piece, while complementary colors can separate specific elements. Also, having a set color palette can help make your artwork more cohesive. They can also create a mood or atmosphere. You're gonna hear those two words often, like how harmony can be calming or contrast dramatic. So picking a set color palette can be quite helpful, especially if you're a beginner artist. Color can also have a symbolic meaning behind them. Now, this might be diving into color psychology a bit, but it is quite important, especially if you want to give your piece a deeper meaning. I mean, the one I'm doing now isn't symbolic of anything in the slightest. It's just silly fan art, but it is helpful knowledge to keep in the back of your mind. Now, I won't list all the meanings and emotions associated with each color, but here's an infographic you could screenshot courtesy of my art teacher. But yeah, something to keep in mind, maybe less so for fan art, but definitely important for fine arts and design. So, remember how I said I've still got a lot to talk about, like a minute or so ago? Well, that was a lie. I've reached the end of my notes. Well, I guess I'll just have to bluff my way through the rest of this video. I'm kidding, I do have a script for this. This is just the end of me explaining things and boring y'all to death. But we still have one last bit here, so let's get to it. Warm and cold colors. If you don't know, warm colors are colors like red, orange, and yellow, while cold colors are colors like blue, purple, and green. They're kind of self explanatory if you think about it. But, anyways, warm and cold colors are significant because of the ways they interact with each other. Warm colors, when placed in front of cold colors, get pushed forwards, therefore creating a sense of depth. The two types of colors can also have their own emotional impact, along with the not yet mentioned neutral colors. These are just colors that are not warm or cold, like brown, black, and white. But yeah, warm colors can be quite energetic and exciting. Cold colors can be calming or sad, and neutral colors can be used for balance. I hope that was a somewhat useful explanation because that's kind of it for color theory. At least what I know about color theory. I do apologize if this is more of an academic approach to it, but most of my knowledge stems from what I've learned in school, and I'm just overall an academic person more than anything. But I do hope this was at least somewhat useful. Also, there's obviously a lot more to color theory than what I've mentioned, the big one being color relativity, but I don't know if I can even explain that. Anyways, we're not done with the video yet, because I gotta relate this to what we're actually doing right now. So, how does this all apply to our dear friend Sunday here? Actually, this would be easier if I pull out the final piece, but not doing that, because I don't want to spoil the surprise that is totally not in the thumbnail of this video. Actually, don't know, I haven't made that yet, but Alright, so where and how have I used color in this piece? Well, one notable thing I feel immediately jumped out at me while I was painting was the contrast between the red of the rose and drapery and Sunday's blue hair. This doesn't really have much of an effect as the two don't really interact, but I think it's still worth mentioning. I also applied values in this piece, which I know isn't what the video is about, but hey, it's my video and I do what I want. But yeah, you can see how the subject is of much lighter tone than the background, which allows him to stand out more. Obviously, I also use this for the shadows. Actually, about the shadows, I have this problem of the values I pick not being dark enough, so I always have to go in with a darker color to make the piece more 3D. A way to spot this is to turn on the color correction or filter so that it's black and white, at which point you can usually spot whether or not your shadows are dark enough. Anyways, back to color. Something else I did and usually do, I say usually, but I've only done this like twice thus far, is using a complementary color for the shadows and highlights of the hair. I do this for the brightest parts of the highlights and usually the darkest parts of the shadows. A tip for the shadows as well, muting the colors will make it easier to blend it. Also, either turn down the opacity or go over the original color with a low opacity brush and color pick the resulting color. Moving on to the skin is made up of analogous colors consisting of red, orange, and purple. I quite like using purple or magenta for shading the skin because it's quite an easy way of creating that tonal contrast I mentioned earlier. I also use it along with blue around the skin later on for a little more visual interest. They don't really serve much of a purpose, but they look good. This way of using color was also applied on I don't know what that's called, the white parts of the piece. Why does that sound so weird? Anyways, I really like adding color to things that are normally white in paintings. Already in reality, things are normally not fully white, so I just like to exaggerate that and add some colors to it. Now, the last time I did this, I actually referred to a reference by turning up the saturation, but for this piece, I just kind of messed around. While the colors don't really follow a rhyme or reason, I do like how they turn out. In a way, they make the piece more romantic. I don't know, that's the only word I can think of to describe this. But yeah, and that's all the things I can think of right now. I'm going to be completely honest with you. A lot of the time, I'm not really actively thinking too much about color. I think this is often the case with theory and stuff, but most of the time, you apply these things subconsciously once you've learned them and practiced them. Which leads me to the next point I want to talk about, which is practice. Practicing the use of color can honestly be daunting, and I myself don't do it often. But as always, practice makes perfect, so finding ways to practice can definitely help. Now, I can't really give you a definitive way to practice, but I'd start with some tonal studies. I know, not a value video, but might as well be at this point. Tonal or value studies are basically pieces done in black and white, and they help a lot when it comes to understanding how to create depth and dimension. You could start small with spheres or fruit and gradually move on to more complex objects like the vase. As for actual colors, try using color palettes first and gradually start experimenting with more varieties and techniques, seeing what sticks. You could also do master studies and analyze the way an artist you like may use color. And remember that what you do doesn't need to be perfect or even look good. What matters is trying out different stuff and practicing and finding what works for you. I do apologize for not having a definitive way to practice color, but I think it's mostly just trial and error. So don't sweat it and put your pens to paper or tablets if you're a digital artist like me. And with that, we're done with color. I am honestly so thankful to past me who wrote and kept these notes because honestly, I would be so lost without them. Also, this is the final piece. It's been on the screen for the past 2 seconds, but yeah, pretty good if I do say so myself. And yeah, I think color is an extremely complicated topic, and my breakdown of this is a bit compressed and very simplified. Also, I'm thinking of naming this video values and colors because values have come up so many times in this video, they might as well be a part of the title. Anyways, the last bit of advice I'd like to give is that when it comes to art and just practicing, what matters most is that you learn with every piece that you do. Well, obviously, not every piece, you don't have to do like 50 pieces just to learn and improve. But if you learn something, if you keep on improving and never stop, then you'll get to the point you want to be someday. I know this sounds cheesy, but I think I would really appreciated that advice when I was younger, and I hope you do too, because that's kind of it from me. I hope you've learned something and enjoyed the video, boring as it may be. And yeah, that's it. Bye!